We've also come to understand over time that simply educating our leaders about the problem isn't enough. And that we're going to have to be politically sharper and more aggressive than that too. And there we need your help as well. We're doing this campaign this year around this country that tries to up the stakes a little bit, to go after the real source of the problem. And the real source of the problem is the fact that the fossil fuel industry makes so much money doing this that they have an enormous stake in preventing action from happening. Fossil fuel business is the most profitable thing humans have ever done. Exxon made more money last year than any company in the history of money, and today's paper says they're well on track to set a new record this year as the price of oil goes through the roof. And they've used some small part of that money, very small part, but enough to, in essence, block people from taking action. They and all the other oil and coal companies in this country. And the front that they have used more than any other is a group called the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. All right? Now, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is not your local Chamber of Commerce. Your local Chamber of Commerce does good things, most likely. Our local Chamber of Commerce in Middlebury sponsors the Chili Festival. That is a good thing. I'm grateful for it. All right? But this U.S. Chamber of Commerce is different. Though it claims that it represents all of American business, it gets more than half its funding from 16 companies. Thanks to the United States Supreme Court, they don't have to say who those companies are. But it's pretty easy to figure out because they spend all their time arguing against doing anything about climate and arguing in the most extreme, almost crazy terms. They filed a brief last year with the EPA. I think I told people this at PowerShift. They filed a brief with the EPA last year saying the EPA should not regulate carbon dioxide emissions because if the planet warmed, humans would be able to adapt their behavior and physiology to deal with this problem. Okay? Not that their 16 companies should adapt their business plan to a world that works on wind and sun, but that all human beings everywhere should adapt their physiology. That does not even really, I have no idea what that means. You know, if it means to sprout gills or what, but I know that if you were walking down the street in Oberlin and someone came up to you explaining that their plan for dealing with climate change was that they would change, you know, their anatomy you would cut a wide circle around them to avoid really, and it's crazy talk, except that if you have a couple $100 million in your back pocket, apparently it sounds sweet and seductive to members of Congress who pay altogether too much attention. Now, we can't take that money away, but we can take that credibility away. Some of it, anyway. The idea that they speak for all American business. So we've been running this campaign called the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Doesn't Speak for Me. We started it a few weeks ago, and there are already thousands of businesses around the country. We desperately need you guys to make sure in the next couple of weeks that every business in Oberlin, including this college, which is a member of its local Chamber of Commerce, signs on. And then it'd be nice if you can get the local Chamber of Commerce to say publicly, U.S. Chamber of Commerce doesn't speak for us either. We're our own entity. That'll help, because your congressman, whoever he or she is, listens to small business and local business and pays attention to them. And they pay attention to you because you go shop with them and because they know that you're wise on these things. So do that work, please. It's easy if you go to chamber.350.org to see how to sign businesses up and so on and so forth. And those of you who are handy with a camera or a iPhone or whatever, 10, 20 seconds of video clip of the local barber with his scissors or the local florist with a bouquet or whatever else, just saying the logo, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce doesn't speak for me. We can spread that around the country and it'll help. And already some big companies are joining in. Apple has quit the U.S. Chamber of Commerce over these grounds, which makes me happier about using my MacBook, you know, and on and on. If I was a good organizer, I would just stop there. And I'm not really. In the end, I'm a writer above all else, and so the duty of writers is basically to tell the truth. And the truth is, there's no guarantee that this will work. And there's no guarantee anything will work. There are scientists who actually think we've waited too long to get started, and that there are things that may make this heating irreversible at this point. Clearly, we've already bought at least a couple of degrees. The question is now whether we can stop it at that, and to do that will require immense amounts of work and a certain amount of luck. And there are political scientists who think it's impossible too, that the odds are simply too high. And, you know, frankly, if you were a betting person, that's probably the way you would be advised to bet. So far, we are losing. We have lost for 20 years. Okay? But that's really not a bet that you're permitted to make. Both the burden and the honor of being a morally awake person when the worst thing that ever happened is happening is that you have to try to figure out what you can do to change those odds. And you have to do it without any guarantee of success. The only guarantee that there is, and this I'm completely confident of, the only guarantee is that there are a lot of people around the world who will fight as long as they can. And the thing that's impressive to me and moving to me is that many of those people are in places, as I've said, that have done nothing to cause this problem, and yet they are willing to work in some kind of solidarity with those of us who have caused this problem. And to me, that's very powerful and kind of demands a strong response. And I know that it's of enormous power to people in those kind of places, in places like Bangladesh or the Maldives, whenever they see things happening in this part of the world and understand that there are people with comparative power who hear their plight and understand it. I've got nothing more to tell you. It's a great honor always to be in those rooms with those people who do that kind of work. And it's a great honor to be in this room. And just to say, I don't know how it's going to come out, but I really look forward to fighting along side by side with you in the years ahead, and we will do our very, very best. So thank you all very much.
Okay, now fossil fuels certainly are part of the problem, yes. But hasn't desertification, yes. And deforestation, yes. Species extinction, a whole host of things. We're losing water resources. I heard about topsoil loss when I was a kid, yes. And I was really concerned about it, and yes. It hasn't gotten any better. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, haven't we lost touch with, our humanity as a part of nature and, yes. And one with nature? And isn't that more of a root cause, I think, than the fossil fuels problem? So,
it's a very good point. One of the tragic things about about dealing with climate change is that it's meant we've had to triage a hell of a lot of other environmental problems and even other non-environmental problems because we have to deal with this overriding one so quickly. It's the biggest thing that we've ever dealt with, and if we dealt with everything else and didn't address it effectively, it wouldn't make any difference what else we did. Conversely, if we can get a handle or begin to on fossil fuel, we'll begin to make significant progress on a lot of other things too. Because it turns out that fossil fuel is the most important stuff on Earth. The thing that changed in this world 250 or 300 years ago was not so much the invention of capitalism as an ideology, okay? Isaac Watt and the steam engine came before Adam Smith, not the other way around. The thing that we learned how to do was burn fossil fuel. And all of a sudden, we each had hundreds and hundreds of slaves and this enormous amount of power. And once we did, then the kind of rise of high consumer capitalism and things was probably kind of inevitable, and with it a million other troubles that have come. We don't have, if we had, I guess to get to your question about whether it's sort of these man and nature and isn't kind of at the root of things and stuff, yeah, it may well be. But given the time in which we have to deal with this problem, we've got to work with within the parameters that physics and chemistry set. That is to say, it would be easier, probably, if we all subscribed to some nature-based religion to deal with this problem. But we're not going to in a meaningful period of time. So we root around in Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism for the texts and scriptures and things that we can find, and it turns out that there are plenty of resources. We're going to have, in the relevant period of time, a market-based economic system of some kind. Hopefully one that puts a hefty price on fossil fuel and hence uses the tools that markets actually are pretty good at for sending signals, price signals out there to dramatically change our behavior. If we had 100 years, it would make more sense to do it very slowly and sort of change culture and do education and adapt in the ways that humans adapt. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time, so we find the levers that we have that are big enough to matter, and they tend to be crude, political, and economic. But yeah, it's a really, really, really good question. And I guess all I'm saying is that I think philosophy follows from daily behavior, not the other way around. And it's one of the reasons that the kind of work that people are doing on things like the Oberlin Project are so important educationally. More important, really, even than an endless series of classes where you read books like mine, because the things that you do every day are the things that inform who you are in the end. So shopping at the farmer's market, that matters too.
I'd like to imagine that you have the ear of influential government and appointed and elected officials. You have their ear. What are you telling them their policy should be?
They all know, everybody knows that the only thing that we can do on a scale that really matters right away is to dramatically change the price of carbon. Okay, that's pretty much where everybody's come down time and again. The lack of, it's not really a lack of understanding how to do it, although there are better ways to do it and worse ways. Cap and trade was a dumb way. This thing we call cap and dividend is a much better way. We could talk about it at some length, but the point is it's useless to talk about it until the first part of your question turns from a assumption into a reality. And the only way we will have the ear of government and business is if we build the movement that demands it. Okay? That's why we're doing this work. That's why we do this Chamber of Commerce stuff. We're never going to have enough money to go up against the oil industry. They're always going to have more money. So we have to have a different currency. And the only currencies we've got are bodies and spirit and creativity. And we've got to use them, we've got to use our artistic ability. Those of you who are at Power Shift saw some small bit of the kind of power of art to make a difference. This kind of street theater on Monday in front of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was powerful and amazing. We've got to use probably the power of creative nonviolence, like people are doing across the Arab world right now, and at much greater risk than any of us are. And we've organized that kind of civil disobedience in the past, and we hope we will in the future. That's important. But most of all, we've got to take this message as quickly as we can into the powers that be. And the movement, I guess what I'm trying to say is, the movement is more important than the message. If we get the movement, if there's the kind of political demand for change, our leaders will not be at a shortage of ideas. That's the part we've had from the beginning. We've got smart policy people. No one listens to them because there's no movement behind them.
frustrating the environmental movement here on campus at PowerShift, I guess in general, is that it's very negative. And I understand where that negativity comes from, but I guess I'm looking, as I move from activism at Oberlin towards activism in Lorain County and the state of Ohio, how can I be politically active with a positive message?
So
what can I say yes?
Let's talk in specifics, or cases. On September 24th next fall, you can say yes to bicycles, all right? And one of the reasons we're doing it is we know that there are a lot more people in America and around the world who like riding bicycles than there are people who really care a huge amount about climate change. So if you organize something really beautiful that day in Lorain County, and you get 500 people out on bicycles, when the day begins, only 100 of them will actually care that much about climate change. The other 400 will just be like, this is like a good, this is cool, and I want to ride my bike and whatever. But by the end of the day, when they've gone and looked at their picture on the web and seen that there are 10,000 pictures from around the world, and there's this 350 thing in the middle of it, and the congressman has come and spoken and whatever, they'll be kind of converted into this movement a little bit. And the same thing with local. It's one of the reasons local food is such a great way in, okay? All kinds of people like it for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with the environment. You just have to make sure that that's not where their involvement ends, that you take the farmer's market and also use it, among other things, as a kind of vehicle for that kind of organizing, and on and on and on. That's a really smart question. And it goes right to that thing I was trying to say before about how if we do this right, yeah, it's going to be a kind of wrenching transition away from what we're used to, and it'll have to happen faster than we like it to whatever. But it's not like we're so incredibly happy with our lives now that it's impossible for us to imagine that there might be some other alternative. The good news is we're not, and people are open to other ideas, and they're especially open to them in the wake of the financial crisis, when we saw that there were a lot of things in our society that were too big to fail, And if you think banks were the main thing, energy and agricultural systems are at least as big and failure prone, and a lot of people understand that at least an intuitive level and are eager for alternatives. So I think you'll have no problem. It's always a problem to organize and get people in motion, but I think you'll be able to do it. Yes?
Speaking of the economy, I think that given the unemployment rates right now, and given the profits of ExxonMobil, and given how low wages are, I feel like raising the price of gas is really unfair to those who have to rely on cars to get to work and stuff like that. And just a general comment on the environmental movement, I think that your slides show that there's a lot of good willpower, and there's the people's minds are in the right place for the most part. But it's in many ways it's not a new story, because when does the government actually listen to people in general? You have certain countries are better, social democracies in Europe, but overall,
so the first part of your question is really correct. I mean, you can't just tell people we're going to raise the price of gas. That's why this cap and dividend stuff, where you put a haunting tax on gas and run the price up to $6 a gallon, but you take all the money that you collect from Exxon and you send it straight back as a check to everybody in the country every month, okay? And 80% of people, the poorer 80%, come out ahead. That's kind of smart public policy that might be politically feasible and make a difference. To the second part, the part about when does government ever pay any attention, well, you can go too far down that road, I mean, look, it's really hard, and yeah, business has most of the cards and so on and so forth, but it's not like it never happens, 50 years ago on this campus, there were buses up front with people your age who were willing to head south, and challenge segregation in a serious way and win. This past winter, I mean today, while we're doing this, there are people your age out in the street in Syria getting shot at, and they're going to win, just like they won in Tunisia and in Egypt, with great displays of courage, of nonviolence, of smart use of the tools that y'all are better at using. One of the reasons that we've been able to be successful to a certain degree, at least in a kind of beta test way at 350, even though we had no money, was that we have this set of tools that didn't used to exist on the net that even the playing field at least a little bit, okay? So we spent all the money we had building a website. And if you go to 350.org, you'll have to confess that it's a good website. It works in like 14 languages, it's really cool, it's fun. It cost us $60,000 to build it, and it was everything we could do to raise it. Well, you know what? ExxonMobil probably spent like $60 million on their website. But it sucks, you know? It's nowhere near as good as ours. It's just like pictures of, you know, Exxon workers in hard hats with penguins and, you know, all this kind of stuff. It's just a bunch of lies, you know? And so the possibility of kind of, you know, taking these guys on, I mean, at the very, I mean, I'm not promising you it's going to work. I promised you it might not. But I will promise you, and this is as good a place as any to end, that if you do it right and in the right spirit, it will be a lot of fun. And that's an important part of this too. Not all fun, and sometimes really tough, but way worth doing. This is the, you know, your grandparents, you know, had to fight fascism. They had to go off to war overseas, you know, and your parents maybe dealt with things like the civil rights movement, and right now, this is the hand that we're dealt to deal with. So we might as well get to it and see how it comes out, and I will so look forward to seeing pictures from September 24th from Oberlin, and I will even more look forward to getting a whole list of every business downtown announcing that it can speak for itself without any help from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, guys.